Welcome to the Thornton Review.
The show designed with you in mind. If it's important to you, it's important to us.
Robert Bender is currently the Escambia County Supervisor of Elections. Robert grew up in Pensacola, Florida. He received his Bachelor of Arts in Business Administration from Rhodes College and MBA from Goizueta Business School at Emory University. Robert was elected to the Escambia County Commission District 4 in 2018 and again in 2022. During that time, he obtained Certified County Commissioner and Advanced County Commissioner 1 and 2 certificates. In 2024, Robert sought and received the governor appointment to the Escambia County Supervisor of Elections and was officially elected to the position during the general election in November the same year. He is currently working on his Florida Certified Election Professional certification. Hi, I'm Pueschel, Schneier, Executive Producer and Manager of the Thornton Review. Thank you for tuning in. We're having a special election for Florida's 1st Congressional District. On November 13th, President Trump announced he was nominating our Congressman Gates, as his Attorney General. Gates resigned his congressional seat the same day. Charles and I wanted to know the process of a special election, so we invited Escambia County Supervisor of Elections Robert Bender onto the show to tell us what and when to expect on our ballot and to explain the special election process. So Robert, it's great to have you on the show.
Good to see you again.
Could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Robert Bender. I'm the Supervisor of Elections. I was previously a county commissioner for 5 years before the governor appointed me as the Supervisor of Election last January, and was re-elected to serve as the Supervisor of Elections for another 4 years. So excited to be able to serve the citizens of Escambia County.
Well, thank you for that. I'm looking forward to an interesting conversation.
Yes.
So we're going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll begin our discussion with Robert Bender, Escambia County Supervisor of Elections, and the special election process. There is no government-funded program that can guide a man's thoughts. Only God can do that. Alpha Fence Company can install any type of fence. When you call and mention the Thornton Review, you'll receive a $100 discount on your fence. They also offer military discounts. Vinyl fence, wood fence, aluminum fence, chain link fence. If it has the word fence, Alpha Fence Company can do it. 850-695-9526. 850-695-9526. Thank you for tuning in. We're going to begin our discussion with Robert Bender, Supervisor of Elections. So, Robert, first off, this must have been a whirlwind year for you. You sought the appointment from the governor after being county commissioner for 5 years. You sought the appointment from Governor DeSantis to be appointed as our Supervisor of Elections. Congratulations on that.
Yep.
And congratulations on the election. So you've been elected. You are now our Supervisor of Elections for 4 years. But the year that it happened during a huge general election had to have been kind of a whirlwind. Can you tell us a little about that?
It wasn't that bad though. So as being a supervisor or as being a county commissioner, I was able to be on the canvassing board. So I was on the canvassing board, oversaw the the 2020 election.
Okay.
And we did a special election for Century in 23, and I was prepared to do that again for 24. So a lot of the operation of running the election, doing the vote by mail, things like that, I was familiar with because of my experience in 2020. I mean, again, that was those 3 elections that we ran in 2020, so very similar. But yes, I was appointed with about 7 weeks before the Triple P, the presidential preference primary, on March 19th. I was appointed January 26th, and so I was able to jump right in and get busy working on things. And I have a great staff, but I think I was also able to leverage my relationships with the county to maybe improve some things, save the taxpayers some money on how we do things, and I was able to leverage that knowledge and understanding of the local government, just operations and finance and things like that, to where I wasn't having to learn that also. Is that I was focused on just running those elections with a clear understanding of how everything else already worked.
That's amazing. That's great.
Yeah.
So how will the new law regarding absentee ballots needing to be requested after January 1st affect this special election?
So the law went into effect in 2022, and January 1st of 23, everyone who had a vote by mail request is wiped clean. So everyone who got a vote by mail in the last general election cycle had made that request after January 1st of 2023. Now we are accepting absentee vote by mail requests right now. Anything after the election day of November 5th, we started accepting the new requests.
Okay, so is it an exception? You're making an exception?
We're not making an exception. So it's that
If you haven't already requested a vote by mail.
Right. So it's for any election through December 31st of the general election year. Because both of the special elections are occurring in 25, we can go ahead and start accepting those requests. And actually, because this is all a new process for everybody, we've actually already wiped clean the 2024 request. The vendor did that works with the state. And so we have started fresh. We have a postcard that has gone out to all the voters who voted by mail in the last general election cycle. And then we also had to send another notice of election to our military overseas voters. And so those all went out, and they've definitely gotten them because our phones have been ringing off the hook for the last 2 days. And so I think we processed almost over 1,000 requests yesterday, maybe about 900. And so it's great to see that everyone's re-engaging. And these requests will then be good through the 2026 general election.
Okay. So you just have to remember every two.
It'll be every 2 years, and we'll be sending out these notices like we did this year. And again, it is tough for some people because they don't realize that they may have just made that request in September or October ahead of the presidential general election.
But they have to do it again.
But they have to do it again.
Okay.
Some of them aren't even aware that we're having a special election. So this is something that we would typically do more maybe in the springtime, but because of the special election, we went ahead and did it. And are taking those new requests now.
Okay. So I'd like you to explain the special election process. How is it different from a general election as far as what is on the ballot and preparing the ballots?
Sure. So it's very similar. March, the presidential preference primary, is going to be very similar to that. March was a Republican-only presidential preference primary. There wasn't a Democrat that was running against Joe Biden in the state of Florida. And so we had about 95,000 eligible voters for this January 28th election. The Republicans are now up to about 101,000 voters. So that's about the number of voters that we'll have for our January 28th special primary. But everything else is still the same. We'll still have 80 precincts, 72 locations that we have to open. We'll still have early vote sites. We're actually going to reduce the number of early vote sites for the primary, save a little bit of money. So
when does early voting begin?
So early voting is going to be Martin Luther King weekend. It will start January the 18th, Saturday, January 18th. To Saturday, January 25th, and we're gonna. The hours will be 9 a.m. to 5:30. So I think just leave that.
I'm gonna be in Washington D.C. on those dates.
Okay.
So I'm not gonna be. I better be there on election day.
Yes, election
the primary day.
Yes.
Which is the 28th.
January 28th, and the polls will be
I'll
open
be back
7
by
a.m.
then.
to 7 p.m.
Okay, and on the early voting, can you go to any precinct to vote?
So yes, you can go to any site. It's we use ballot on demand technology, so you'll check in, and then we'll print your ballot for you right there, and then you go vote, and then you get to drop it into the tabulator just like you would at your precinct.
So from the early voting from January 18th to the 25th, you can go to any precinct in Escambia County, right?
Yes.
Okay, you can't go to Santa Rosa or Okaloosa.
Correct.
It's got to be Escambia County. But then on January 28th, you have to go to the precinct that you are assigned to.
Your home precinct, yes.
Okay.
And so we will send out a sample ballot to everyone who has not requested to vote by mail. It'll have the locations of the early vote sites. It'll have the location of your precinct. It'll have the hours for all of that. And then it'll also have the sample ballot.
What if you're not already registered to vote and you want to vote in this election? Will you be able to?
You can. So the deadline to register or change your party is December 30th. And so, we have a great relationship with the Department of Motor Vehicles that usually when people go get their driver's license, especially if you're 16, you can pre-register. So we have a lot of kids that are turning 18 that as they turn 18, they automatically get registered because they did it when they got their driver's license.
Yes, my son did that.
Yes, it's a great feature. It's most people don't even remember that they've done it.
Right.
They just get a letter from me saying happy birthday, you're now a registered voter, and
That's
here's your
great.
voter information card.
Yeah.
So we have that opportunity. You can go online. We have applications in our office to register
You
to
can
vote.
register to vote online?
Yes.
And there's no paper involved. You just do it. You upload your information, your IDs, and everything.
There is some. You do need like a wet signature. We want an authentic signature when you're registering to vote.
So you'll have to print something out, sign it, and then scan it back.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, again, we have it in our office if you want to come by and do that as well.
Probably easier. Okay, so who decides the dates in a special election?
So, let's talk about who gets a special election.
Okay. Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
a U.S. congressman like Matt Gaetz, so to replace his seat, or a state House of Representatives, or the state Senate. Those are the three that would give us a special election. And so we do have one of those with Congressman Gaetz resigning. And so the governor, in conjunction with the Secretary of State, Cord Byrd, came up with the timeline to hold the special election. Of course, there were a lot of things that we're taking into consideration. There are federal guidelines about when you can mail the vote by mail to the overseas and military voters. We call it the UOCAVA Act. And so that has to be done 45 days before the election. So when you have to do that for the primary and for the special general, that's 90 days right there before you've even done anything else.
So you said Corey Byrd decided the dates?
Yes, so the Secretary of State probably discussed it with the governor, and the governor's order came out establishing those, and then
So they had to look on their calendar and they had to count the days and say, will this work or will this not work? Because they want it as soon as possible, but they have to give it enough time to actually make it work.
Right. You had to announce the qualifying dates 2 weeks before the qualifying period. So again, you've done 2 weeks. That's an extra 2 weeks. You have to give us time to actually create the ballot.
Exactly.
And so Tallahassee, the state, handles the qualifying for that. So the candidates had to send their paperwork to Tallahassee, pay the qualifying fee over there, and then the state sent us the list of qualified candidates, and we created our ballots from that.
So y'all go on your computer, or somebody at your office goes on the computer, types in the names, puts the R or the D or whatever, the NPA beside the name. What is there going to be anything else on the ballot?
There's not. It's just this one item. Now we did have State Rep Joel Rudman. He resigned to run, and so I believe his resignation date was January 1st. And so parts of Okaloosa and parts of Santa Rosa will have another special election. Again, whenever the governor decides to call that with the assistance of the Secretary of State in establishing those deadlines or those dates. So they'll have another special election to fulfill his seat.
And Joel can run in that election.
It depends on when it is, but
Yeah,
most,
depending on
but
when it
yes.
is. Okay.
So
Well, that's interesting. That's kind of a twisty turning
It
of
is.
events, because that would be kind of ironic, I guess, if he was elected again.
Yeah.
Which could happen.
But again, we talk about these UOCAVA ballots, these military overseas, and so you ask if there was anything special about a special election, is that you follow the same guidelines of a general election. And so...
Or a midterm election, are they all pretty much the same?
So last year for the Triple P, the presidential preference primary, and the general, the military overseas voters have 10 days to get us their vote by mail ballots back.
Wow.
You have to be overseas. If you're domestic, it still has to be back to us by 7 p.m. on election day. But if you're overseas, you have that 10-day period as long as it's postmarked by election day. And so that applied in March and November, but not to August because it was a primary. But because this is a special primary election, the same rules of a general election apply. So, like I said, going into that timeline of establishing when those election days are going to be, we have to factor in the 10 days to allow the military overseas voters to get their ballots back to us after the January 28th election day, and then we still have to certify the election and things like that. So a lot of moving parts and nuances of the state statutes and things that you have to account for when establishing the dates of a special election.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be an appointment genius, an appointment book, calendar, because that is a lot of planning that goes into it. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
And probably a lot of double checking.
Definitely, it's with only one contest on the ballot. You still
Names
make sure
cannot be misspelled.
they cannot be misspelled.
You can't have an R instead of a D on accident.
Right.
Yeah, that's...
So we're looking for the primary is that because it's a closed primary, so only Republicans vote for Republicans, Democrats vote for Democrats.
Yeah.
We don't have to list the party next to each name on the primary. We just say it's the Republican ballot and they're all Republicans. Now, again, in August, we had that universal primary for the ECUA races. And so we did have their party affiliation next to them because some of, when the two Republicans were running, they were on Democratic ballots and things like that. Same thing with District 3. Here was, you had the two Democrats that ran, and so on the Republican ballot, you do show Democrat. But other than that, everybody on that ballot's a Republican, or everybody on that ballot's a Democrat, so we don't have to put the party affiliation next to each name.
Right. So, well, January 28th is just a very important date because that is pretty much going to determine possibly who our next congressman is.
Possibly, yeah. Definitely as the Republican nominee.
There's no runoff.
There is not.
Whoever gets the majority of the votes is going to the general special election
Correct.
Against the Democrat.
Yes.
So that's it. That will determine who it is.
Right.
On January 28th.
Yep.
So now, when is the general election for this?
So April
special?
1st will be the general election. Again, we'll do 8 days of early voting, Saturday, March 22nd to Saturday, March 29th. We haven't finalized the times for those yet, but we do know that those are the statutorily required dates to host early voting.
Okay, great. Yes, it's important to get those.
And I'll just say, as I said, we've reduced the number of sites for the primary, but for the general election on April 1st, we will have all 10 of our early vote sites that we normally use available.
Okay.
But just based on the use and how many voters were served in the March presidential preference primary, it was tough to justify spending all that money to stand up those sites. So, but we'll still contact all those voters that were there to let them know that site won't be available. Let them know where else they can go, that they can request a vote by mail or go on election day.
Okay. Or they can probably go on Facebook and ask their friends. That's what I do when I need to know something.
They can be very resourceful to do that.
Okay, so the general, is it called a general election for the special election?
Yeah, the special general election.
So the special general election is April 1st.
Yes.
So we can't express the importance of getting out the vote on April 1st.
Correct.
April 1st is the day.
It's the day. So, and again, you look at, we have over 100,000 registered Republicans in Escambia County. We have, I think we're up to about 218,000 right now. So it was about 46% Republicans, 30% Democrats, and of course, but you also, for this, because it is the congressional district, You also have Santa Rosa, Okaloosa, and Walton has all of their voters as well. So, you know, a number of candidates are from Escambia County, and I know that you know, people always say, when was the last time Escambia County had a representative that lives here? So,
Yeah, right. It's been a while
It
since
has.
Scarborough, right? Scarborough.
I think so. Yes.
So, statistically, do you know how many, for instance, registered Democrats vote Republican, and how many people who are registered Republican vote Democrat? Because just because you're registered a certain way
Right.
doesn't require you to vote that way.
It does not, and I'll say I found it interesting in looking at some of the vote by mail results. Is that I think the Republicans had an 1,800 vote lead over the Democrats in number of registered voters for each of those parties. You had about 5,000 NPAs that also voted by mail.
Sure.
But if you look down the ticket, every Democrat was beating a Republican, some by a very sizable margin. So I did not expect to see that, given the fact that 1,800 more Republicans voted than Democrats. Again, you have those 5,000 NPAs, which tells me most of them probably voted Democratic.
So you're saying that people who are registered Democrat did vote Republican? Is that what you just said?
No, I'm just saying that the results of the vote by mail from the November election caught me off guard a little bit. I was surprised to see that the Democrats had such a sizable lead just from vote by mail, when there were actually a majority of Republicans, 1,800 more Republicans voted than Democrats. So, yes.
So you're saying the opposite.
So right. So there were. Well, again, it's there are when you look at the ballots, a lot of people do go party lines. There were people that would vote for the Republican presidential nominee, and then Democrat on the rest, or vote for Matt Gaetz and Democrat on everything else. It was the same way. They'd vote Republican on everything, but then vote for Gabe Valmont for congressman. So you do see some of those, but for the most part, it's just down party line.
So, what goes into preparing the ballots? And you can answer any other.
No, so again, a lot of it's proofreading, right? We want to make sure that everything's spelled correctly, and we're lucky in that once we put it in once, we don't have to put it in for each precinct. As we do have 80 precincts, and so we need to make sure that the precinct number is correct. Depending on the election, you may have a precinct that's split. So some are county commissioner splits, some are state rep splits, and so you want to make sure that the splits are correct. Fortunately, with this, because it's all the congressional district, we don't have any splits, and so again, making sure that everything, even like the date, is listed correctly, that it is the Republican Party, things like that. Make sure that the instructions are there for the voter.
And making sure all the information's on the website, that's a huge task.
Yes.
That's a huge job.
And it is, and so we are in the process of trying to update everything.
Yeah.
We've got our countdowns up, telling you how many days until the elections are up, how many days until you register to vote.
You have a really good website. Whoever's doing that is doing a good job.
Well, I appreciate it. It's definitely, and there's a lot of parts to it. So my plan had been to spend more time on the website this off season. I guess you want to call it off season. But here we are running an election right now, so it'll have to wait a little bit.
Yeah, you were appointed, general election, you thought you maybe had time to breathe, but then all of a sudden it's huge special election.
But it's great though, because it allows us to continue to improve on things. Each election we run, we find things that could use a little bit of improvement, right? I'm a fan of Six Sigma, continuous improvement, and and so one of the things that we did was we now deliver in-house, which saves about $20,000 an election. And so, I mean, that's a $40,000 savings over the next 3 months, 4 months, just in that alone. So, little things like that. Again, that was being able to leverage my relationship with the county, and we utilized some county employees to help us deliver that. And so that is a big savings. But things like that. We have we plan on probably purchasing some new equipment for voter check-in, but again, we'll have to wait on that until we can put the special elections behind us. We don't want to be really implementing new policies and procedures and things like that. We do have to do poll worker training. So every poll worker is required to do training before every election on their specific duties. So we'll have to do a lot of our time right now, between now and January 28th, will be poll worker training.
So I know in the Republican Executive Committee, we always have somebody who's kind of the person in charge of getting volunteers for poll watchers. But then the poll workers that's something completely different. But they're actually paid employees of the Supervisor of Elections office.
They get a small stipend. It really is small, but they're the ones that when you come in, you present your photo and signature ID to check you in. They may give you the ballot. They'll assist you in putting your ballot into the machine. Again, you get to do it, but they're there in case there's a jam. And really, it's a physical security that they provide as well. If you think about it, the person standing next to the machine is there to make sure that you're putting one ballot in or something like that. So, and again, we do a lot of accounting throughout the day. So our clerk is the one who is essentially the manager of the site. They're constantly checking throughout the day the number of check-ins, the number of ballots that have been counted in the machine, things like that. And if there is a discrepancy, they'll make note of it and then gives us the opportunity to figure out what's going on, what happened. Was there someone who didn't get checked in, or it was reversed, or something like that? So we really do try to figure out every single vote. And we do that in the weeks after the election. We just a week and a half ago submitted essentially the voter history reports to the state, and we had spent a month after the election going through all those and making sure that everything was right and trying to determine.
I want to get into that. We're going to take a commercial break in just a minute, but have we covered the special election? Is there any more information that we need to add for the public that they need to know?
Yeah, so again, just the registration dates, the deadline to get a vote by mail ballot for the special primary is January 16th. That'll be the last day to request it. The deadline to register for the general election is Monday, March 3rd. And then the last day to request a vote by mail to be mailed will be March 20th. So again, we'll have all these dates on our website, escambiavotes.gov.
Escambiavotes.gov.
Yes.
People need to go to that for their information on where to vote and when to vote.
Yes.
Great.
And then also the sample ballots are already posted as well. So we will be sending those out. We want to try to get them in their mailboxes about a week before the early voting starts. But if you want to know what's going to be on your ballot, again, there's only the one race. So hopefully it's not too much, but you can go to the website and check that out as well.
Great. Well, we're going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll continue our discussion with Robert Bender, Escambia County Supervisor of Elections. There is no government-funded program that can guide a man's thoughts. Only God can do that. Alpha Fence Company can install any type of fence. When you call and mention the Thornton Review, you'll receive a $100 discount on your fence. They also offer military discounts. Vinyl fence, wood fence, aluminum fence, chain link fence. If it has the word fence, Alpha Fence Company can do it. 850-695-9526. 850-695-9526. You can watch the Thornton Review on our website, thethorntonreview.com, our Facebook page, The Thornton Review Show, YouTube, Vimeo, and you can watch the Thornton Review on WBQP television station 12.1 and 12.8. Thank you for tuning in. We're going to continue our discussion with Robert Bender, Escambia County Supervisor of Elections. So Robert, just a quick question. When somebody shows their ID when they vote and the poll worker scans their ID or their voter card so it goes into the computer so that that person cannot go to, like, say for the primary election, they can't go to another precinct and vote.
Right.
Because would it
So
would
it's a
it
couple
show up
different things.
for that person, or do you catch it later, or how?
No, it would show up. So we update in real time. So if you think about for early vote sites, it's showing that you went and voted at the main library, and then you can't go down and vote in the supervisor of elections office. But the idea is that state law requires that there is a photo and signature identification that is presented in order to vote. If you don't have that, you can vote provisionally, and then we treat it similar to a vote by mail, validated against everything that we have on file. But again, we're one of the few states where that ID hasn't been challenged. And so, so again, they come in with valid ID. There's 12 different forms. Most common is the driver's license or Florida identification card, passport, military ID. Military ID doesn't have a signature on it anymore. So there may be like a credit card that they need to give along with the signature ID or something like that. So they present those, like, as long as there's, because what happens is when they sign the pad, the poll worker will validate the signature against what they've given us.
Yes.
But
they've done that to me.
Right.
And I have to sign again.
Sign again. And so, but yes, that meets the statute requirements of presenting photo and signature ID when you go vote. But when you do request a vote by mail ballot, one of the things that Florida's done as part of that Act in 22 is that you have to either give your driver's license or the last four of your social. And so what I like to say is that Florida's addressing vote by mail security on the front end by requiring that information. It's also very limited on who can make that request for you to receive a vote by mail ballot, and they still have to give your driver's license and the last four of the social, one of the two, when they make that request. So again, we have a little, if you received a postcard about renewing your vote by mail request, we have that little security tip on there that you need to be prepared to give those to us when you call in. And we validate that against the DMV. So when we add that to an account, we go into David, check the voter's driver's license number, or the state will check the social security number.
Okay. So this is a for instance, and this is to test, voter security.
Sure.
I feel very confident that Escambia County is a secure place to vote. People aren't going to commit fraud here, hopefully, and if they try to, they'll probably get caught. But could somebody, say for instance a student who is living in another state, request a vote by mail ballot, but then also be registered in that state to vote? Can they request a vote by mail ballot in Pensacola from Escambia County,
Right.
but then also be registered in another state and vote twice, essentially?
They can. I mean, it's still a felony. And I think that's where Florida's excelled in going after people that do that. And that is part of that report that I just sent over to the state, was a list of everyone who had voted, and they have that information, and so they will again look at other states. We get lists. When I first came in office, we got a list of that someone had found that had voters that were registered both Georgia and Florida.
Right. So you actually found some people that did.
So it's not really illegal to be registered in two places. It's more about it's voting twice. And so I laughed at one of the people on that list. I was trying to figure out if I knew anybody. It was my sister, and she had thought she had removed her name from the voter list in Florida, and and she hadn't. So once she let us know, then we were able to remove it. Again, when you're leaving town, when you're leaving Georgia, for instance, you're more worried about shutting off your power and your water, not necessarily worried about removing your name from the voter registration roll.
Right.
And so, but that's a lot about what we do during these off-election year cycles. So again, something we had to take into consideration with those voting dates was that we have to start the process for list maintenance service by April 1st of every year. But you can't do it within 90 days of a federal election. These are federal elections, so we are going to get started a couple days late this year versus what the state statute requires us to do, but that's because the federal election law would take priority over that. So, but we had planned to do the list maintenance 2 or 3 times this year, or this coming year, but still to do it some.
I'm glad you're doing that. That's
Yes.
important.
And again, we use the national change of address that, so when you move, you put that little postcard in the USPS to let them know that you've changed addresses. We go against that. We use a couple different, we use LexisNexis to verify people. And, it's not just once we find one thing, we'll take you off the rolls or something like that. It's an opportunity for us to contact the voter. And a lot of that even is with military, right? One of the things that Florida started this year was that if you return your driver's license in a state, they've now started to notify us that you've returned your driver's license. Again, that doesn't mean I'm going to take you off the voter roll. You may be a military voter that is able to get a new driver's license in another state, but you still want to keep your permanent residence in Florida that you intend to return here after your service. So it just gives us the opportunity to contact the voter and ask what they want to do.
Awesome. So as far as the general election, we just had a general election in November. We have a new president, an old president that's now a new president again, put it that way.
Yeah.
So does your office undergo an audit after each election?
Sure.
Can you tell us about the audit, if the numbers were the same as what you counted and what the audit came up with?
So we do the audit immediately after we certify the results.
And who does the audit?
The office does. So we instituted something earlier this year. Again, every piece of equipment that we use has been certified by the state.
Sure.
So it's actually something that David Stafford, who was the supervisor before me, had acquired in 2022. But the software that he acquired, the new software that they use, had not been approved by the state yet. So he wasn't able to use that for the 2022 election. So March was the first time that we used the audit system. What we do is that as we're opening the vote by mail ballots and tabulating the results, they immediately get scanned into our audit system. And then the early votes, we bring those back every night. And then a couple times throughout the week, we'll scan those into the system. And then in the days after the election day, we'll scan those into the system, and then we compare the results by early vote by mail, and election day. So we had over 2.7 million votes were cast. So we had about 176,000 voters vote in the general, and think about it, there are about 17 races on each ballot. So based on the ones that weren't skipped as an undervote or didn't get double voted, we ended up with over 2.7 million. We had one ballot that was scanned in twice, so when the voter put it in, it jammed, and the poll workers grabbed that ballot and put it into another machine, not realizing that it had already been scanned. On the reverse side of that, we had a voter put their ballot in, and it jammed, and it didn't get scanned, but when they went to get it, it fell in, so they weren't able to essentially go in and get it. But when we scan all those ballots into the audit system, we can see those discrepancies. And then there was also two vote by mail, one on Amendment 3, I think, and one on Amendment 4, where I think that the voter used pencil. Okay. And so the audit system picked it up as a vote where the tabulation system didn't. But when you think about it, out of the 2.7 million votes that were cast, we had 35 votes that were differences. 33 of those were from the two ballots that were either read twice or not read, and then 2 votes on 2 amendments that the tabulation system read as an undervote, that the audit read as a yes or no vote.
Well, that's good.
So that's really great. That's over a 99.99% accuracy between the two systems. Again, they're separate systems. Our tabulation equipment's not connected to the internet. They're just plugged into power. And so
Russia or China can't hack it.
But again, we still take those paper ballots at the end of the day and run them through an independent system, scan those, it comes up with its results, and then if there is a discrepancy, we determine why. So for August, we had 9 votes that were different. We had one ballot that had been I think scanned in twice, so that was about 3 votes. We had 5 that the tabulation system didn't pick up, where the audit system did, and then we had 1 vote where the voter had scratched through the candidate's name. The tabulator picked it up as a vote, but the canvassing board said no, that should be a valid vote. So
because they were scratching that candidate out, like
right.
No,
and then it just happened to go through the oval. So again, I can sit here and tell you all the differences between the two, and I think that's what we wanted, is to show the accuracy between the two.
Yeah. Well, I was involved in the recount between Gillum and DeSantis in 2018.
Yes.
And that was interesting. I enjoyed doing that. It was a room full of people,
Yep.
and a room full of Democrats and Republicans, and sometimes we didn't agree on things, but the count was pretty much accurate. It was the same.
It is, and that's the thing is that we know.
It came out the same.
Right.
And that really solidified my faith in the Escambia County Supervisor of Elections, that those are fair and honest elections here in Escambia County.
And I'll say, so what happens is that the machine, if you're voting in person, early vote site or on election day, and you go to put your ballot in, if there's an erroneous mark that prevents it from being read, it's going to show that it's an overvote.
Yep.
If the entire ballot's blank, it'll show that it's a undervoted ballot, and it'll ask the voter what they want to do. And so a lot of times there would be, you'd start to fill in that yes, maybe you put your pen down, it leaves a mark, and then you go, oh no, I wanted to vote no for that. The tabulation is that sensitive that it'll see that mark and it'll pick it up as an overvote. Now what happens is that if we went to a recount, the canvassing board would look at that and say, okay, the voter's intent here was that it was supposed to be a no vote, not an overvote, and so we could assign that vote. And so those are probably some of the little differences that you saw between.
It was.
But
yeah.
it's we saw.
It's a mark outside of the oval, kind of a check mark, and you don't really know where it is.
Right.
So we counted it at the closest one that it was at.
Well, for us, again, the state puts out rules on how to do that. So on those check marks, as long as it crosses that oval in two places, as long as it doesn't touch two ovals,
Sure. Okay.
then you can count that for a vote. I was part of the Jennifer Braher PC Wu recount in 2020.
Okay.
So on election night, Jennifer Braher had a 5-vote lead. We went to the automatic recount, which is done by the machines.
Mm-hmm.
Still 5-vote difference, which led to the hand recount. And fortunately, there are only 2 precincts there. Again, you're talking about were 3 statewide elections that were had to be counted. And so we found 2 that the voter they were counted as overvotes. And I remember David showing them to Jennifer Braher, and he says, these are votes for PC, and she says, yes, those are. So she ended up, we certified the election when she won by 3 votes. And so that's what we do. We take into account a voter's intention.
Sure.
So a lot of times people will X through one and then fill in the other.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll put an arrow, I want this one, no on this one. So, and what we do is we duplicate that ballot so that it can be run through the tabulation machine. All the votes on there would be counted. And then we also put a unique identifier on the duplicated ballot so we can always refer back to the original to try to look at that voter intent. But again, we had a very good board. We had Judge Dixon was our chair of the canvassing board, and then we had John Robertson was the director of animal control, was the representative of the county, and this time we'll have Mike Kohler, commissioner. Mike Kohler will be the board representative, and Judge Dixon will be the chairman of the canvassing board again.
So if someone requests a vote by mail ballot, can they vote in person?
They can.
How do you know that they didn't send in their ballot and vote in person?
Sure. This happened quite a bit. You're relying on the USPS. We had a lot of great conversations with them. They brought ballots to us right before 7 p.m. on election night, so I do want to give them kudos for what they did in making sure that they got all the ballots to us. But sometimes we do know that pieces of mail get lost. So you know that you've mailed your ballot back to my office. We have ballot tracks. You can go on our website to track your ballot, see when it's been received. And if you get there and it hasn't been received yet, I would tell you to go to because if we did get it, we would either see that you've already voted in person, or if you go to vote in person, you would see that it's already been
So when you go
accepted
to
and received.
count that mail-in ballot, and you're putting it through a machine, right? Would the machine say, oh, already voted?
So we do it before then. So it's really when we're logging it in.
Okay.
When we're validating that signature, that's when we'd say that the voters voted. It may be a week, 5 days before we actually count the vote, but it means that the ballot's been accepted and will be tabulated before election night.
Because that mail-in ballot it's different than the ballot that you get in person voting, because it's marked with something.
So we do. Part of our security is that we put a V in a box so that if you did have a vote by mail ballot and you went to try to put that in the machine at the precinct, we don't have a problem with that. But what we did is we had some extra security that we could add, and so we did, is that the tabulator at early vote or at the precinct will not read that ballot because there's something in the box.
But it also identifies the voter.
does
That
not.
mail-in ballot.
We don't. The envelope does. So the ballot, the
Okay.
ballot doesn't have any. I have no way to link the ballot back to you, but the envelope,
Okay.
and that's why we do everything on the front end. So when we get that envelope back, we scan it in, we validate the signature, then we mark it either as accepted or that it needs.
So you're
needs
scanning
further
in
out.
the mark on the envelope.
Yes.
And that is saying that that person voted by mail. So if that person tries to go and vote in person, it's going to say, nope, you've already voted by mail and we've already received it.
And it again updates in real time. So as the person sitting there checking those in and validating those signatures, it's automatically updating the voter record to show that their vote by mail is being counted or accepted.
And then vice versa of what I just said. If they vote in person and then you receive the vote by mail, it's gonna, and you're scanning that envelope, it's
Yeah.
gonna say they've already voted.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. And again, a lot of those, you know, you don't know to trust the USPS, and so you want to make sure that you vote. I'm not going to go after a voter saying that they tried to double vote on that, because I would tell people that if,
Yeah, because if they don't know that
they
it's
don't
already
know,
in,
right.
yeah.
Now, if you've voted early vote and you try to go vote again, I mean, again, there's a little gray area there but again, I think it's the intent of the voter, right? And I want to make sure that your vote is heard, your voice is heard, that your vote gets counted. And so if there's a possibility that doesn't happen, I want you to take whatever measures you can to exercise your right to vote. But trying to vote again, knowing that you've already voted and your vote's been accepted, that's a little different.
Yeah, very. And that, people know that.
Yeah, but again, it doesn't mean that they're going to. Again, we're going to show that you've already voted. We have that, you know, it updates in real time. So again, if you vote in the main library, you're not going to be able to go downtown and vote again.
So after the general election, then after this unexpected special election, you have until the midterms to prepare for the midterms, provided no other special elections or any other thing comes up unexpected. What does the office do in the off season?
So again, we're going to start. We're going to look at acquiring some new equipment. It's the devices that we use to check in. Is just they've reached the end of their useful life.
Okay.
Voter maintenance, the voter maintenance roles.
Yes.
Of course, working with the state legislator, I want to try to push something forward where we have access to the vital statistics, the death records. We already get lists every week from vital statistics about death certificates, but if there was a way that I could log into that and just pull it up, and, you know, and the example I give is that
That would be great.
a widow calls me and says, "Hey, my husband passed away." Right now, I'll say, "Well, I'm not showing that yet. I need you to send me the death certificate," or I could say, "Well, if you give me his name and his date of birth, which we already have on his voter record, and the date of his death, I can pull that up and show that there is a death certificate that's been issued. I could go ahead and remove that voter." So it hopefully make it a little bit easier process. But again,
Or somebody moved away and now they're registered in a different state.
Right.
Like my son moved away. This is
Sure.
hypothetical because it's not true. But my son moved away. He's registered in a different state. He needs to be removed.
Yes.
What if? So you would need proof that he moved.
Well,
and so take
there's
a
just a form that I would send him that says,
Okay.
"Here, please sign this." You can take a picture of it and send it back to us. But you think about that on the other side, right? Is that I don't want someone to be able to send an email and say, "Hey, Robert Bender has moved to another state," and then I go to vote
And
and,
then you're taking
I'm
off
off the roll. So that's why we
Sure,
ask
you
for a
have to
signature.
verify,
We have to
absolutely.
verify it, and I think that's proper security in that instance. Again, it's not necessarily illegal to be registered in two places, but it is illegal to vote in two places. So,
okay.
and then again, some of the things that Florida's done, we have, I think about 44,000 voters that are in the inactive list right now. And if you're inactive for 2 general election cycles, so essentially a little over 2 years, depending on when you fall on that list, you're automatically removed after the general election. So we are getting ready to remove a lot of voters that have not voted, requested a vote by mail ballot, or updated their address when they went inactive in 2022.
Okay. So if you don't vote for 2 election
Not if you
centers?
vote, but again,
If
if we
you
send
don't.
we send out these sample ballots, and if we get it back saying you've
Mhm.
moved, then that starts that process of us trying to contact the voter, find out where they are, what they're doing, and
They
if
could have moved across town.
they could have moved across
Yeah.
town. But again, we
Or
also
they're
want
in
to
a
make sure
different
that
precinct.
that-
then.
exactly, we want to make sure that they're getting the right ballot, that you're
Yeah.
not getting to vote for city council when you don't live in the city, or you're voting for the wrong county commissioner. And so that starts that process, and that's why when you go vote and give them your driver's license, they'll ask you, are you still at this address? If not, it may mean that you have to go vote at another precinct, but we want to make sure you get the right ballot.
That's great information. We're about to have to wrap it up, so can you tell me anything else that you want the viewers to know about the Supervisor of Elections office?
Sure, I would just say, of course, we're here to help you. If you have any questions about what we're doing, as you go through all these scenarios that happen during the general election, a lot of times I would say if they had just given us a call to ask what they needed to do. Sometimes, again,
Your
when you
office
move-
is very helpful.
I appreciate
because
that.
I called
Yes.
because I wanted to know if a state house representative files to run for this special election Congress, if they had to resign.
Yes.
And you actually called me back.
I did,
And I
I did.
appreciate that.
Well, and again, some of that information the ladies at the front aren't as familiar with. And,
Oh, absolutely.
And so,
and I understood that
and,
because this is something that is special.
It is.
And you're not.
it took a lot, and trying to work through everything, and again, we didn't really have the opportunity to say, hey, this is when we want to do it. We were at, as I said, it was whenever the governor tells me I need to run an election, I'll run the election and safe, secure, and accurate. And so they were working through all that. Again, did the resignation apply to the 115th Congress? Was it only the 114th?
Right.
Things like that. So, and
Well, they did give me helpful information.
Right. Well,
They
good.
just didn't give me the answer.
Sure,
Which
sure.
you called me and gave me the
Yes,
answer. So,
yes.
yeah. But they're still very helpful.
No, they are. They're great, and but even vote by mail requests, I know we've helped with that, and so it is really what. But that's what I say is that if voters would just call and ask us a question, sometimes they'll move after we've already sent that initial ballot.
Mm-hmm.
We'll send them another ballot, and then they send us the original one back. Well, we can't accept that because they're no longer there, or they're worried that they have sent the first one in, but we've actually set it aside because we've gotten their change of address form and we're waiting for them to do it. And they're like, well, I didn't want to send in another one. No, I sent you the second ballot because I need you to fill that one out. So it's I would say if you have questions, give us a call. If there's a queue, if there's people waiting to have their phones answered, that's the only time you won't be answered by a human. I think that's important for me to have customer service. Is that when your call gets answered, you're not having to sit there and hit buttons to try to figure out where to go. The ladies up front or the gentleman will assist you.
Absolutely. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I'd like to have you on again
All right.
after the special election
Sure.
and the audit.
Yes.
Because it's all interesting. And I think it's something that our viewers are interested in. They want to know how secure our elections are here in Escambia County. That's very important.
Yeah, so real quick, let me just, the dates. So, we will do the logic and accuracy test on January 8th at 10 a.m. It's a public meeting, so they're welcome to come watch that. That's when we'll randomly select voting equipment that will be tested, and it essentially will run it from putting ballots in to sending the results to making sure that again, this is where we're making sure that a vote for candidate A gets counted as a vote for candidate A. And we will go through the audit process and test the audit process there as well. But when we do the audit, all of our canvassing board meetings are open to the public, and so 10 days after the election at 3 p.m. is when we're expecting to do our audit, assuming that we can get the information back from the vendor.
How many people usually show up to those?
Nobody.
Okay.
So, and that's what I said, we're happy to have
I
people.
might, just out of
I would love to
curiosity.
have you, and because
Please
especially
remind
for
me.
the logic and accuracy test,
What date is it?
January 8th.
At what time?
At 10 a.m. We'll have all these posted on our website. We'll post them in the paper. But we do. I mean, we had a couple candidates actually come for the logic and accuracy test in November and August, and we walked them through the process. WEAR is there sometimes, but usually for our other meetings we don't have people there except for election night. So These are public meetings. We're happy to have people come watch and learn about the process. And we did have some other Republican Party members come, and they would sit there and look at our vote by mail process and how we're deliberate in each stage and how we're doing our accounting and verification every time. And they'd be there for a little bit, and they said, "Okay, looks good. We'll leave you to it." And so, but we always try to come in and talk to them and explain the process when we can.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, happy to.
The Thornton Review is on the air to provide public service awareness and intellectual infrastructure to our community. This show was made possible by Ida Gates of Godly Teas LLC, Alpha Fence Company, and our guest, Robert Bender, Escambia County Supervisor of Elections. It was great to have you on.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate
Very
it.
informative, and I love it.
Well,
Good
thank you.
information.
Yes,
Thank you.
excited for the special election.
And we thank you for watching this episode of the Thornton Review. Bye-bye.